Hey guys, it's Tom from BadCuzDad. I am joined by a friend of the channel, Brock, our resident Guild Wars 2 expert. And the reason why I wanted to bring Brock on today is, as you guys all probably know, the 2023 spring roadmap just dropped, and kind of a roadmap going through the end of the year, and then big news on the expansion kind of cadence and philosophy going forward. And so I just thought it was perfect to bring Brock on and chat about it. So Brock, man, thanks for joining us. I'm just going to get right into it. The 2023 roadmap. And let's just talk about what they just announced. So February 28th, right? Just a few weeks away. We're getting a new story, right? To progress the End of Dragons story that's been going on. A new map, it sounds like. They said maybe new enemies. I'm not sure if that means a new meta to this map. I'm kind of unclear on that. Maybe we can talk about that. Obviously, there's more balance updates that are coming out. And then the last big one that's coming out on the 28th is Suwon Legendaries, of course.
Yep.
And so let me just get right into it with you. I know you're a big collector. I know you're big in the story, or maybe you are. I'm not sure. You can tell me. But so, I mean, exciting news that we're just getting new stuff, because I feel like it's been a little dry for a while, right? So how are you feeling about this upcoming patch?
It's crazy. It's like the expansion was just a year ago, and it feels like, man, a year is a long time. But I've still been playing frequently and haven't even gone through the story on more than, like, I've only gone through it with 2 characters. So I'm like, oh, I'm still playing End of Dragons on a regular basis, still doing the metas, still having fun there. So even though it's only a year old, I go back and forth between, man, it's already a year, and when's the new content going to come? But I'm still, happy with what I've got so far. But I can't believe the next bit of the story is coming out in 2 weeks. Like that's like right now. I've got some I wanted to go back through and play this and that. Nope, I gotta get this stuff done because I want to play the new content as soon as it drops.
Yeah, and as you know, I'm mainly a PvPer, so I think I'm all caught up on story. I usually only do the story on one character, my ranger, which is my main. And so I'm ready for new story. I think it's going to be cool. I'm actually still working through the season 1 stuff that came back out. So I'm pretty close, but when I jump in the game, if I want to do story and I'm not doing PvP, I'm running through that, trying to get just everything caught up with all the story in the game. That's kind of the only thing I haven't finished off.
Right.
And so the new story is going to be cool. What about the new map, right? So what did we get? Did we get 5 maps on
4 maps.
Launch? 4 maps that were on launch? Okay. And so, I mean, this has been a little while, obviously. Did they say, I'm trying to remember, did they say they're going to expand? It's going to be in the Jade Sea, right?
They didn't specify, like, I don't think it specifically said that it was going to be a new map. Maybe it is. I could pull up the exact roadmap that they said, but I remember they said something about going deeper into the Jade Sea. So to me, that seems like a new map, because the current maps that we have, I don't know how there's a hidden area that you lock off and is still going to be Jade Sea. I'm thinking of Dragon's End is like the one where the Jade Sea is, and we got to go further south, further east of there, which to me means new map. New enemies, they also said. So I'm wondering, I'm real curious how they're going to take that. And also seems like I'm maybe getting a little ahead of myself. Seems like they want to kind of wrap this story up this year, kind of put a bow on End of Dragons and the whole Dragon saga. So I'm just curious to see how they're going to kick it off here, kind of the finale, if you will, and where that's going to. Hopefully, that'll give us set up for how the story is going to conclude before we get new stories in the future.
And then I think it does mean new map. I'm looking further down. I forgot, in the fall, I have it listed as fall, winter, but they said second half of the year, they will maybe expand this new map that's coming out. So, It does look like it's going to be a brand new map. And probably the big one for, I think, most players, at least players who are plugged in and playing every day maybe, is the Suwon Legendaries. And I'm assuming that's something you're probably going to go for?
Yes,
Or
that
not
that will
sure?
be an eventual bucket list. Currently, I only have one of the legendaries, and it is the Orine pistol.
Oh, okay.
And so, but I haven't gotten enough mats to be able to craft it into one of the other unique dragon types and stuff. I don't know which one I would go for first, and I guess when the Suwon legendaries come out, I'll see about that and maybe make
Depends what
that
they look
the
like.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've-
Gotcha.
Ultimately, like my pipe dream would be to have all the legendaries of all the dragons, but like I said, I have one so far, and it's the Orine one that you get first. So yeah, I still have a long ways to go if I'm going to get all those collections.
Okay. And so they also mentioned they weren't super specific. I mean, the post was a little vague in some areas.
Uh-huh.
And I've seen a lot of people mentioning that they wanted more detail. And so it's understandable. But they mentioned in maybe the next quarterly update talking about a new fractal with a CM, World v World updates, continued updates. Not exactly sure what that is yet. DX11, I've heard some stuff about them. This Chromium update that's going to help out the auction house, which is way outdated. Well,
Right.
you're trying to do multiple things on the auction house, it just freezes on
It's just
you. It's
yeah.
hard to use. Yeah, and then more quality of life. They did mention PVE map queuing, which I think is super interesting.
That
And
that would
then
be so awesome.
yeah, let's get into that. Why, for those who don't know, why is that such a big deal, especially with the End of Dragons meta and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, like since ever since metas have been like map wide metas have been the thing to do with Heart of Thorns. You want to make sure that you're in a map that is doing that meta, and especially when with End of Dragons, where there are these rewards that are like so heavily gated to doing the metas. I mean, they released challenge missions or challenge modes and all that stuff that you can earn extra antique summoning stones and the other gated materials and all that, and you can buy them from the Arbor Stone. But just if you want to get in an organized map and get like all that loot, it's just like a huge amount of random drops that you get. It's got to be you gotta at least have a bare minimum of willing participants, and sometimes it's hard to coordinate that. And even though they kind of foreshadowed this a little bit, I think with the party UI, the LFG tools, and saying this map is at capacity, this map is at capacity. I think they did that around Halloween last year.
Okay.
And now it's good to be able to see that maybe if it works how I'm hoping it'll work, that you can actually queue up for a specific map instance. That oh hey, your commander's on that map, or your guildmates are on that map, and you're trying to do whatever meta event with the people that are also going for it. So it'd be really great instead of trying to try and lead a 50-man pug on something that even now I'm still seeing fail occasionally if people aren't actually participating in like the Dragon's End meta and stuff.
So you're saying like if you have a guild and you have this many people, or because I know like for example, I know you're in the guild that does the triple trouble, and
Right.
it's very organized and they get in and they do it. So if you're saying you have an organized group, the map queuing is going to be a nice way to get everybody in. But also,
Yep.
if you're just going in, maybe you are trying to pug and there's like no good maps. I mean, you can choose to just tag up, right, and make
Yep.
your own map and get it going, kind of
Yep.
a deal,
Yep.
which is really cool. So I think it's going to be a really cool feature, really good quality of life, and so that's good. The fractal, I know you have went in cycles of being into fractals and not, and is the new fractal excited? I mean, are you excited about that, or is it not at this
I'm
point?
sure I'll play it because again, I do enjoy the story, I enjoy the lore, all that kind of stuff, and just the small geeking out moments and playing through End of Dragons, and they're like referencing the Sunqua
Yeah.
Peaks fractal in there. Like it's like, oh, I know exactly what they're talking about there. It makes the world feel more complete. So I don't like
Right.
having aspects that I haven't played through. So I am excited about a new fractal, but since it's not my main PvE play content. I'll play it. I might get, that might spark me back into a cycle of doing fractals on a regular basis again. But hey, more content. I'm always excited for more content, more options to do. Find your niche in the game.
Yeah, and me as a PvPer, fractals are not always super, drop in, drop out friendly for a player like me. Who I think at one point I built agony resist, but now to change, to a certain build that's good, that's a ton of investment in time. And when I get in, I'm a drop in, drop out player, so I don't want to invest that time into making whatever the current meta is, or farming agony resist on this new set of armor kind of a thing.
Yep.
And so, I mean, would I like to play fractals? I'm still having my fingers crossed that they're going to maybe remove agony resist or make it account wide or do something in the future.
Some sort of quality of life that you
accessible.
Yeah, maybe instead of having to use like an extractor tool to remove that stuff, maybe make the agony resistance. If you've already built up all these +9/+9s or whatever on all your gear, then you need to just like if they could make that removable, then again, Guild Wars is really good about getting quality of life stuff. I also understand that you got to have gold sinks and all that stuff in the game, but I feel like that would be an easy switch with the release of a new fractal, and if they're going to focus on regularly updating fractals like they've said they're going to with the future content stuff, like hey, that's a good thing to look at.
Well, I don't want to beat a dead horse here. I know tons of people in the community have talked about it, but if you're fractals, it's almost backwards, because fractals are / dungeons should be the feeder into strikes, but there's so many requirements on fractals that it doesn't really make sense. And if you're going to continue to bring in these new players, with expansion hype, once a year ish, they're going to be like, why am I locked out of this level of fractal or something? And why is the gearing so complicated for this? So I do think it needs to be a rework, whether they just make it like level bound, like you just have to progress through all the levels as you work your way up, or whatever the case may be. But I know a lot of people are going to be excited. One fractal a year, though, is it enough? I'm not 100% sure, but it's better. Isn't there like a website with a counter on how long it's been since there's been a fractal and a raid? I know they have a meme at this point.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. I don't, since it's not my main play style, I'm sure someone is out there like very like angrily. They wrote that code and they're keeping track of it like to the day. But it doesn't surprise me. There's so many systems in the game, so many play modes and stuff in the game that there's a lot that they have to update. And if anything gets neglected for a while, it's somebody's favorite game style. And so like they've got so many things to do, and like they've said before, like they have limited manpower to do it. So it sucks when things get left behind like that. But ultimately, as they're still looking forward, hopefully they'll get everything gets a little bit of love.
Speaking of neglected game areas, I'll have a rant towards the end of this, so stick around for that if you want to hear that. So
didn't mean to set you up on that.
No, it's okay. And then they kind of mentioned very vaguely maybe some things that are coming in the back half of the year, right? So I don't know if this is going to be a fall. I know they're trying to do things quarterly, and I think they're setting that up now to follow that quarterly model with this new expansion cycle they're going to do. So I don't know if it's going to be fall or winter, but they said they are going to wrap up the story of End of Dragons, and I'm assuming they mean the overarching,
the whole
Dragons
saga, I believe.
Yes, exactly. And so that's going to be coming. They also said the new map that's coming out on the 28th is going to be expanded. So it said a new meta in bosses. So I'm not sure if that implies we won't get a meta on the 28th with the new map. Maybe just, I don't know. Maybe they'll have multiple metas at that point. But usually you don't have two big metas on one map, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see with the new map if they're going to go back to like hearts, or I don't really know. We haven't got any adventures in a long time.
Uh-huh.
There was no races in End of Dragons, right? If I'm thinking correctly
Yeah.
in the maps.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see with this new system what they're actually going to put into the maps. Is it just going to be strictly a meta map? Are they going to have other things for open world people to do who aren't into the big metas like the End of
Yeah.
Dragons meta? So I don't know, but they are going to bring something new. And then the way it looked like what they're going to do is they're going to start setting the groundwork for the expansion in
Yeah.
this last update that's going to come out. And so um, that leads us into it. Let's just get into it. The next thing they posted about was their new approach to expansions and to delivering content. And I have seen a wide array of this is the end of the world to this is the greatest thing ever. And so
Yeah.
we'll get into that kind of, but what did they announce? So they announced that it's going to be, they didn't say an exact date, but my interpretation, it's going to be on a yearly cycle ish. I don't know if it's going to be exactly a year to date. I know a lot of people have referenced Elder Scrolls Online kind of has this model. Every single January, a new mini expansion drops, right? And so that's kind of the way they phrased it. I don't know if they said mini expansion necessarily, but they said a smaller expansion but faster. So
Yeah.
we're going to kind of interpret what that means later, but they also said that would come with a reduced price, which the expansions aren't very expensive to begin with, but
Right.
that's fine. That makes sense, right? If you're not getting a 2-year expansion packed with things, just a 1 year, that'd be a little cheaper. And then they're going to have these quarterly updates down the road. And if that's going to be okay, if that's going to be 3 or 4, we don't know. So that will determine how long we have in between these yearly expansions, basically.
Right.
With the launch of the expansion, they're going to bring a new story arc. And what do you think about this, Brock? I know a lot of people, I think, are excited now that the Dragon Saga is kind of over, that they can have these contained, interesting stories from year to year, and it can play out over the year. But then, okay, that's good. Now we get to move on to something else. Are you excited for that, or do you like the long form, or is it just the Dragon Saga went way too long? We just need anything new at this point.
So I didn't really feel like the Dragon Saga was like, this still we're fighting dragons, still we're fighting
Yeah.
dragons. Like, I mean, the original launch logo for Guild Wars 2 had a dragon head in it. So you know what you're doing. Now, 10 years later, I totally also understand people saying this has been a story that has dragged on. There's been too much on this, but think of all the things along the way. Oh, you got the Palawa Joko stuff. You've got things up around like just going to. I guess because all the dragons were different, I thought it was always varied enough, and there were
Okay.
other things in the world going on too. But a friend of mine has recently got me into Magic the Gathering, and I love story, I love lore, I love all that kind of stuff. And so I think like my hope is that ArenaNet wants to do something kind of like uh, Wizards of the Coast has done with that, and what they've done for a long time. And I know that's like, oh, watch out, Wizards of the Coast is a terrible company, like they just want to steal your money and stuff. But like their story and their mentality for Magic is, hey, they release these sets every quarter, and they're all kind of independent, but they have something that weaves them through. And then after like 2 or 3 years, there will be something that has been teased throughout. Hey, this is taking place on this world. This is taking place on this world. But then at the end, or kind of like when they reach the end of a story cycle, then it's all coming to a head before they reset the stage for the next story cycle. And so that's kind of what I'm
Sure.
hoping they'll do. Like even if each expansion has its own kind of self-contained story adventure thing happening, that you get hints and maybe some mysteries that are left unresolved but then come back again in things. And it doesn't have to be, hey, it's all one big bad at the end, but how do these things globally start to interweave and stuff like that. That's what I would really hope to have.
Okay. Well, like I said, a lot of people are referencing Elder Scrolls. Some people Destiny 2, which I do play. I really like Destiny 2, but they have these self-contained stories that play out over the year and kind of like these things in the quarterly updates that kind of vary it. And Destiny has these battle passes and extra content. But anyway,
Mhm.
so that's either way. I'm happy for some new story and go to new locations. I feel like there's so much of the interior of the Tyria map that could be explored
Yeah,
on these one-off stories or just cool things that can be done right in places we
yeah.
haven't gone and seen. And so that's exciting. But they did also announce uh, at the launch of an expansion, 2 maps will come with it, right? And
Hmm.
again, with maps, I'm so interested to see what direction they take. Or is it going to be a kind of a return to hearts and adventures and beetle races and all these kind of cool, I don't know. I like open world, so I like those things. Or is it
Hmm.
going to be maps that have these big meta maps, right?
Right,
That you do the meta deal, and that's the purpose of the map. So
right.
I'm interested to see how they do that with the 2 maps. They also announced 2 strikes. I'm assuming they'll follow the same model. You'll play the easy version of the strike in the
In the
story.
story, yeah.
Yep. And then they'll come out with the regular mode. Um, and then they mention later they'll come out with the CMs. But then they mentioned this thing, big expansion feature. So something in my mind that is like mounts
Yeah,
or there's gonna be something like a draw or to the expansion. You got to have it to bring people in.
right.
More masteries, and then obviously rewards. And I'm assuming that means like legendaries and all kind of new
Yeah,
things.
new collections to go for that
Hmm.
like they're going to keep you in that world, even long term, even after like the second, third expansion. Looking way down the line, because that's what Guild Wars is really good about doing, that incentivizing players to go back to old content, old
Right.
areas, and play through that stuff. So, yeah, I think any sort of incentive they can have to keep people coming back to, you know, the very next expansion, whatever it's going to be called,
Okay.
they'll just enticing people back to stay in that area a little bit more. You mentioned new features
Hmm.
there, and we'll talk about this a little bit later. You mentioned it. Um, some of the things that like we thought were kind of missing from the specifically mentioned being mentioned in
Yeah.
their post, but yeah, those big expansion features. I'm hoping they mean like new elite specs. I'm hoping they mean
Mm.
new mounts. We got the turtle with
Hmm.
End of
Yep.
Dragons, and in Living World Season 4, you got the beetle, and you also got the sky scale. So there were
Right.
2 mounts in a Living World season, and they're all right.
Mm.
If we look at that as kind of, even though it's not Living World anymore,
Hmm.
um, can you release an expansion that's like, hey, the big feature here is a new mount, and then the next expansion is, you
Right.
know, a couple like new elite specs. Like, I'm okay with, doesn't have to be everything all the time,
Hmm.
because there's no way I see that being sustainable on the timeline that
Sure.
they're trying to go for.
Okay. Yeah. No, we'll talk about that a little bit later too, because I do want to zero in on some of that stuff. Let's
Yep.
get through the rest of. Let's see. So after that, they mentioned that they're going to have these quarterly updates that go with the expansion, right? So they mentioned that 1 new map will be added throughout the year. I would assume they'll have the release, they'll have 1 quarterly update, and maybe in that second quarterly update, possibly they'll add the new map. I'm not 100% sure, but they said they will also have additions to the map later. So,
Hmm.
kind of what they're doing right now with this spring version, where they're giving us on the 28th a new map, they'll expand it in the second half of the year and add some things to it. So, it sounds like that's the model they're going to do with these expansions. And then new story content, obviously, throughout the year. 1 new fractal and a CM for that in a quarterly update. And then they will expand on that expansion feature as the year goes on. I heard, I think it was WP who mentioned he thinks in one of the new updates that's about to come out, the Jade bot will be expanded with more
Hmm.
features. And so
Hmm.
that could be an example of an expansion feature getting things added to it later on,
Right.
kind of a deal. So let's let's do this. Let's figure out what it means to go from a 2-year expansion, which is what we kind of, I think in my mind, I thought was going to happen. They were going to go 2 years and have these big expansions, to now this smaller style. Now, I've heard this said, it's almost like they've just rebranded Living World as an expansion in a way. Like, it's almost like they're merging the two, maybe I should say. Because like with, what was it? Season 4, like you mentioned, we got tons of content. They're almost treating it like a more than a Living World.
Yeah.
And so that was maybe kind of a model, but what are your thoughts on that? Do you think this is a smart move? Like, so for example, I'll do one example, right? So we're getting 2 strikes, it sounds like, at launch. Now, if you go back to End of Dragons, we got 4 strikes, but play that out over 2 years, right? So now we're getting 2 in a year. So it's almost the same, right?
Right.
Kind
Same
of the deal.
pace,
Is that how you're? Yeah. Is that what you're? What are your thoughts? Is this a positive or negative? What are you thinking?
I think it is. I think it is a good way for them to kind of. It does feel like they're distancing themselves from the Living World model. The concept of, hey, you play it, it's a limited time event, is great in theory, but then you get a huge amount of player base over time that has this like this effect of, hey, I missed that content, or even if you're an active player at the time, life circumstances could cause that FOMO of, I never unlocked that, now I have to spend gems and get
it's
that
not new
bitterness
player
too.
friendly for sure, right?
Definitely not. Yeah. And so I think it is really good to kind of try to keep some momentum from the Steam launch with new players, and if you've been like playing Guild Wars 2 on Steam, I don't know where you'd be in the storyline at this point, but you'd want to have that constant new content coming out, not hitting that gate, that paywall of, oh, I have to pay for this now, I have to pay for this now, which
right.
you kind of understand when it comes to an expansion. You have to pay for an expansion, but this kind of shifts it around a little bit. I do feel like what you said there, that it's basically just taking a Living World and maybe rebranding it as an expansion, but toning it down. It's not putting like all this pomp and circumstance, this hoopla on, like, we have an expansion, and it's some people will play it in 24 hours. That they spent 5 years between expansions developing. So it's like,
right.
I think it's a way for them to focus in more and say, hey, this is expansion, this is new, everyone's going to be experiencing this, and you get to have these on a regular basis. I think they're trying to strike that middle ground that will appeal to as many people as possible.
So if they hit the cadence that they're saying, I think we'll get as much as we would in an expansion over, this is weird to say, a 2-year period, almost breaking an expansion down into 2 parts. So I think we will be getting... It's hard to say. We obviously need some time to see how it's going to play out, but I don't think we're going to get less for more money. I think if they hit the cadence in the release windows, it's going to average out to about the same amount of content over a 2-year expansion. Right. If you just get a good dose of content over the year, and they can replicate that year after year, I do think it could be positive. Obviously, it's a huge caveat. We have to see, can they keep up with the quarterly updates? Can they give us the things? Is 1 fractal a year good? Which I guess it is. It's more than we've been getting. You know what I mean? Right. I guess the big thing is 3 maps a year good? Is that enough? In an expansion, you get lots of maps. You know what I mean? Kind of a thing.
Yeah, I guess if you look at something like looking at the Path of Fire, Living World Season 4, Icebrood Saga, and if you look at all of that as one massive expansion, trickled out over the last 5 years or 6 years. I forget, 6 years now, I think. Uh, that's a lot of content, and that might be more than what we would get at this on this new model. But that was like there were large periods of nothing new, nothing new,
Right.
nothing new.
Right.
And so like I think even if it does tip it a little bit more towards, hey, we are getting less in the same amount of time, possibly it might feel that way, or at least on paper it might look that way. I don't think it's going to feel that way because it's going to be always something new. Hopefully, that's my hope.
And I mean, 2 strikes a year seems like not enough based on what we just got with End of Dragons. So I'm hoping they have a few surprises up their sleeve, like going back and turning some things into strike missions, right? Like
Yep.
the Balthazar fight is one people bring up a lot, or the end of Heart of Thorns. I even heard a wild thing recently about some people are just like, take the bosses from raids and turn them into strike missions, kind of a thing,
Yeah.
which I don't think the raid community would be very happy about that. But
Right.
so anyway, I hope there's some surprises, some things they can add on top of some of the stuff they're listing. But this is, I kind of wanted to go here next. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, elite specs. I think this whatever the expansion wide big feature is, I think is what's going to make or break this model.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. Guild Wars 2 is an old game. They've kind of done, there's not a whole lot more expansion, big things you can do, really. They've done almost all of them, right? And so you have the big ones like player housing. You have elite specs is a big one, right? That people want. And so I see this big expansion feature as, I think masteries are cool, but I'm like, they're not a big expansion feature now. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say they're kind of boring, but End of Dragons ones were not, for me, they were a good addition, but it wasn't like, oh, they have fishing now. If I'm a player who doesn't play Guild Wars, I must buy this expansion, kind of a thing. But a new class,
yeah,
I don't know. Let's hear your take on elite specs. Like, why are elite specs such a high on your list, kind of a thing?
I've again, it kind of goes back to that. Like, if you have lots of ways to play, everyone will find something that they enjoy doing. And so, and I also feel like you said, it's an old game. It's 10 years old, and even though you've got 9 classes and each class has 3 elite specs, once you hit max level and you go into the expansion content and stuff, you could make the case that means that there's 36 different classes.
Right.
But as you go through time, if you don't continue to iterate that, if you don't continue to add more to that, then that's going to make the game feel stuck. It's going to make it feel stagnant. And so even though I don't play all the elite specs on all the classes, I've got an alt in every class, and I try to unlock them all. But realistically, each new expansion, I probably only play like 2 or 3 elite specs, a lot.
Right.
And so I understand that it makes their job harder to balance all this stuff in the long term. But I think that like the payoff that you get for having the shot of life into your game of having new elite specs on a regular basis is worth it. Now, I also know that like, if you're trying to make 9 new elite specs every year,
that's a lot of work.
I don't think that's going to happen. But I think if by keeping it generic in this blog post, maybe one of the expansions you get a new race. The next expansion, it's going to be new elite specs, and then the next expansion is some other. It doesn't have to be the same big feature every expansion. If they're coming every year, you can kind of like spread it around.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'll just touch on elite specs. You kind of brought it up for me, and I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. So I I feel like after Path of Fire, balance was in a really bad place because with elite specs comes a huge amount of power creep usually,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they make these, of course, if it's your big expansion seller, you got to make them OP so everybody plays it. Like when Death Knight came out in WoW, like everybody's
Mm-hmm.
playing. You want people to choose it, and you want it to sell the expansion. And so I actually, I don't think I want any more elite specs personally. If they do anything, I think I would like them to. And again, this doesn't sell expansions, but as a PvPer for balance sake, I would maybe like to see them expand on the core classes more. Like maybe add more core trait lines or adding new weapons, or weapon skills or utilities that aren't necessarily tied to a elite spec, if you will.
Right.
But that would also refresh your elite spec because you have a new core trait line you can choose from to play
Yeah.
with your elite spec. But there's only so many roles you can do in the game, right? Your
Right.
damage or your heal support or your like alacrity quickness support or your
Yeah.
condi damage. You know what I mean? So if you can build that up to where every class can cover kind of one of those roles, I think that's
Right.
enough. Because like you're saying, I think you're just, man, how many games have this amount of specs, and
Right.
it's just a lot to manage. It really is. And of course, I'm always looking at it from the PvP lens, and so balance is just tough. For open world, of course, you're probably, even me, I'd be like, cool, yeah, let's have as many specs as possible, and let's
Right.
just make it fun and let people go wild.
Yeah.
I don't know, any comeback on that? Am I just like you're a PvPer, nobody cares, they don't even care
Well,
about you?
no, it's I mean, I think the PvP balance and the world v world balance is already like hard enough. This is
Right.
this is it's not really a comeback, but I'm like, like, hey, if it's already
Already at
imbalanced,
critical mass.
right,
It's like, who cares?
if everyone already only plays like these 5 things, these 5
Yeah.
builds,
Right.
you add, over a 3-year time period, you add in 9 more builds that maybe
Yeah.
one of those sees rotation in a PvP setting. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not gonna like revitalize that game mode for you, but
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think that, like, I mean, sorry, but most of the player base is more PvE focused, and there are times that I'll still run around old areas with my dragon hunter just because I like the flavor of the
Yeah.
dragon hunter build, even though it's like, this is not optimized. This I
Right.
just want to be a guardian with a bow, so
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. And don't worry, we're not done. I'll get back to PvP. But before we get there, um, I think one of the other things that could really be a big seller for this expansion, and you touched on it, is new races. Like, we've never had a new race, right, added to the game, and races sell expansions. And make no mistake, the reason why they're going to a yearly expansion and dropping Living World also is because Living World does not sell Guild Wars 2.
no,
Right? No one reads Living World on a blog post, on a website, or a YouTube video and is like, "Oh, I got to buy this."
yeah,
Expansions sell games.
yeah.
And
I'd love to
so,
have that fear of missing out if I don't play during this 2-month
right.
window. Like, no one wants that.
But hey, I could be a new race. Oh, I could be a Tengu. I could be a Koden. I can be whatever. I mean, you could do so many, things with new races. Adding just one a year. I mean, I think that is, I mean, I don't know how many years Guild Wars 2 has, but I know that's a lot of work with a storyline and stuff like that. But still, I think that sells an expansion. And so, if people want new races, I don't know. Is that appealing to you? Would that
Yeah,
sell you? Yeah.
and I think, like, again, if they were being purposely generic in this blog post about the expansion features, I
Mm-hmm.
think that they didn't want to paint themselves into a corner and say new elite specs
Right.
every
Right.
year.
Sure.
Again, if you can kind of dish it out over time and think
Mm.
about on a 5-year cycle or 6-year cycle, if you have a new set, 9 new elite specs during that time, great. What else do you have in that time? Maybe you get 1 or 2 new races. That's awesome. Maybe you get new mounts. Like, that's awesome. Like, you have all these things that instead of it being just one big box right at the very beginning, and everyone takes their one specific thing and runs with it, if you slowly trickle it out, not like you're withholding, but you're, every year it's something different. Different players are going to be appealed to. Different players are going to get this thing that makes it special for them. Then I think that gives you much more longevity. I would love to play a Tengu. I've got a character. I've got one of my character names on my like one of my alts is has a name that I've figured out, like, oh, this is what I would name a Tengu character.
Don't say it out loud. Or
Nope. In anticipation of the day when if Tengu is ever playable, I'm going to delete that character, create a new one with that name, because it holds it for 24 hours.
Tengu Ranger sounds pretty cool to me. I'm not gonna lie. I think that would be pretty awesome. I mean, I agree. Races are gonna sell. Elite specs would sell. Although for me, like as a ranger, I would love a double down, like on a bow build, right? Like adding a new trait line or adding new traits to the marksmanship or something. That would be super cool. But the other elephant in the room for features, of course, is player housing, right? I know we have our home instance and it's kind of a little take, and then we have the guild halls, but I don't know. Don't players want this? Casual players? I mean, I think I would engage with it. I don't know if it's like my number one feature, but I think a lot of players want this, don't they?
Yeah, I think as someone who came into Guild Wars 2 as a non-MMO player 9 years ago, like, and I didn't really play the competitive side stuff for a couple years. I was, solo player, maybe group content and PvE, but player housing, anything that I can tweak and make my own and customize, like that. I mean, it's just another aspect of, Guild Wars 2 is Fashion Wars, but now it's like your whole home instance that you can design from the build up, depending on how crazy they go with the features on that. Like, that would be, I think, massively appealing to like the MMO player base and the Guild Wars 2 player base.
Well, and I'm sure they could monetize the crap out of that in the gym store, if they wanted to. So I don't know. Those are a couple things that I think are expansion features, and make no mistake, I do think the expansion features are going to make or break if these, because people might just look and say this is just Living World rebranded. If it's not, if they're not getting something cool that's worthy of an expansion title,
right? They're calling it an expansion. When this first expansion comes out, it needs to have some some marquee feature about it that will make people say, oh, that's why it's an expansion, not just a new game update.
Right. And based on the droughts we have seen in Guild Wars, if they can hit this quarterly release cadence, I think there's going to be enough content, in the game, and new maps regular. And I think more it's knowing, for example, why like probably Elder Scrolls, Destiny 2, Final Fantasy 14. I think why a lot of reason they're successful is people know when content is coming. Like, there is no guessing, right? You know what I mean? Even if you step away, I think those are all games you can step away from, but you know when you're going to come back, because without a shadow of a doubt, I'm getting this is the expansion, this is the patch cycle, all of that. You know what I mean? And Guild Wars 2 has lacked this forever, right? And so I think that might be the biggest thing coming out of this. And I know it seems like a lot of people are really negative that I've seen some of their remarks on this, but I actually feel like since Colin and Josh Davis have come back to the game, I know you have to be in the weeds of Guild Wars to know these names and the people behind the scenes, but I think they've done a phenomenal job of kind of fixing communication, but then also kind of fixing the flaws of the game, like getting season 1 back.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Making the shift to strikes and adding the CMs, and they haven't got to World v World yet, really, or PvP, but they said, hey, these are our pillars, and I think their track record so far in the last year to year and a half has been really good. So I'm optimistic. Are you up on Guild Wars 2 moving forward? I mean,
Yeah,
I think you
yeah,
are. Yeah.
yeah. I agree. Like it feels like when you asked me recently, hey, do you want to make a video about what do you want to see in Guild Wars 2 coming up? Like my big one was going to be I want to see a roadmap. And then
Hmm.
before we even had a chance to record the video, then
Yeah.
just they just released this roadmap for us,
Yeah.
and it's good. But having more information, like I'm not asking for like all the secrets on give me an exact date of when this is coming
Sure.
out, when this, but just knowing, like the little teasers at the right after End of Dragons released, and they released their roadmap last year, and they said, "Oh, we're working on our expansion. We're announcing it right now.
Hmm.
Next expansion coming."
Yeah.
Um, like it's things like that that make me like I'm firmly in the this is not a dead game camp because there's so much effort being put into future development and letting
Hmm.
players know about future development. Now, we go a couple months without any sort of new update, and I'm ready for the next little teaser, the next little bit. But yeah, it's very good to. It feels good to know that there is a plan in place, and you're kind of being told the plan to some degree.
Yeah. So I'm about to get into mine, but I want to ask you first before we do. Was there anything left off that you were like, we need either some smaller content that they didn't add, like, or just some things they just were vague about and didn't mention, like adventures or other side content, or something big that they didn't even mention that you were like, this was on my wish list. I wish they would have spoke about this, or I hope there's still hope that they will add something that they didn't mention here.
I kind of have two things, and I mentioned one
Okay.
earlier with the elite specs. I
Mm-hmm.
I would love more elite specs in the game. It doesn't have to be something ridiculous, but just
Yeah.
making sure that every couple of expansions we have new ways to play. I think goes a long way to making the game feel like it's still a living thing. And the other thing I was just thinking about was that I'd really like to see. I don't know how you do this. I'm not a game developer in any like in that realm at all. But if the game is called Guild Wars, I would like there to be some other focused way
Mm.
besides guild halls, besides meta events that you can kind of really get communities formed together. And so if the World v World guild revamp thing
Restructuring.
is
Yeah.
yeah is if that's ever going to make it like okay, this is what a guild war is like, guild v
Mm.
guild kind of stuff. I think that'd be an awesome feature and could bring in a lot of players who want that sort of game style. But those are my two biggest ones: is confirmation on elite specs and somehow making sure that Guild Wars has a focus on guilds in the
Mm.
future with these expansions.
Well, we all know they've left guild missions in the dust to an extent,
Yeah,
left behind with in the scrap heap of, you know, dragon response missions and
yeah,
dungeons and the whole
dungeons.
everything. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So, yes, guild stuff would be amazing. Anything, whatever they decide to do, whether it's guild missions or some other systems. Um, and so now we're 45, 50 minutes into this discussion. Brock, where is the talk about PvP? What is going on? Okay, I don't want to be negative, but
I
I'm like losing my mind.
yeah,
The big deal when Josh Davis and Colin Johansson came back is like we have three pillars to this game, and it's open world and it's PvE, right? You got your open world in your instance. It's world v world and it's PvP. Okay, well, where is PvP?
yep.
I don't understand. Like maybe in a month in the summer update, they're gonna come out with a whole new. I mean,
Yeah,
They have to,
It's
right? They have to say
yeah.
something about PvP at some point. Like what is going on? We
As
haven't had an
slow
update in years. Tell me.
right
I mean, since Stronghold's tanked.
as slow as the push for world v world guild structuring stuff. At least there's progress there. PvP is just we got tournaments and like
It runs
that's
itself. Yeah, they don't have to
yep
touch it, right? That I think that was
right
the whole goal with tournaments. So it's automated. Now we don't have
yeah
to do anything. Go do your own thing, PvPers.
yeah
I
it's
am. I don't know. I'm
you
not
need
like
new maps
raging,
you need
but oh
yeah
man, I
you don't really I don't think you maybe you have a different take on this. I don't think you need new game modes. Uh, and I mean, you have probably much more developed opinion on this. I think the normal capture the flag conquest is fine, but you need new maps. You need more things in there. You need to make sure that you're. I don't know like I don't know what you do with PvP. It just
okay.
seems like it's been so long.
Well, I'll throw my 2 cents in, right? I've listened over the past year, mainly on like Teapot's channel, bringing on these pros to talk about the state of PvP and what's wrong with PvP, and they're just getting it wrong. They they don't understand what they're saying. Like the last one, I think you had Helsith and some other big name PvPers on, and they were like, yeah, well, we need like 2v2 and 3v3 and kind of other game modes. And here's what they're missing. Guild Wars 2 is the ultimate casual MMO for casual MMO players. Yes, they have raids, they have the CM strikes for the 1% of players. It's a very small percentage. In PvP, when you go to WoW and you play arenas, their highest form of rated play, it's 2v2, it's 3v3. When you reduce the number, when you have a 5v5 game mode as your only game mode, it is hardcore by nature. Don't
Right.
forget, when Guild Wars 2 was made, it was originally made as a hardcore PvP game, was going to be the original philosophy. Esports was huge. That was like their big deal. We're making an esport, this 5v5. Eventually, they brought in the PvE elements and it kind of shifted, but it was brought in with lots of PvP complexity. But at this stage, the only thing that will revive and revitalize PvP is making it more casual. This is what
Yep.
they're missing. And so, yes, to your point, they need a WoW battleground system. They need 10v10 or 8v8 game modes, whether it's capture the flag, point, I don't know. Star Wars The Old Republic has tons of cool game modes, like breach, setting a bomb on a door in Void Star and making your way through. They have Hut Ball, which is kind of like a mini football game where you pass the ball and you try to score. WoW has so many different types of battlegrounds, and cool features that you can do. And so that's the deal. You want a new player to come in and just be one of 10. You don't have tons of responsibility. You don't have to run a meta build. You can just go in, zerg with your team, or go do 1v1 this guy on a node, or you don't have to run the meta. You have less responsibility because you're part of a bigger group, and you can just drop in and drop out. Like, it's not, right now, if you're going to play 5v5, you might as well play ranked because everybody's who plays PvP is in it. Why would you even play unranked 5v5? It's counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah.
if you want to go remove Stronghold, right? If you want to play a MOBA, go play a MOBA.
Yeah.
We don't, plus they it probably could have been good if they would have kept, iterating on it, but it is what it is now. And so, am I losing my mind, Brock? Did everything I say, are you like, no, that I wouldn't play PvP if it was like that?
No,
Or am I
as
right?
a casual PvPer, I'll still occasionally play, especially if I'm like needing to get PvP currency for
Yeah.
achievements or whatever. But I would be way less inclined to play PvP if it went more to a hardcore mode of 2v2, 3v3. Like I don't want to play that. Like I'll play the 5-player unranked 5v5 unranked because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not like I don't want to have to, like you said earlier, you don't want to have to go restructure your build when you're going to go into do fractals.
Right.
Even though it's a click easy change this amulet and your entire build is different, I don't want to have to learn how to play this meta build for PvP, which is
Mm.
totally different than PvE. Uh, I want to go in and play something close to what I'm used to playing and have fun
Mm-hmm.
in PvP, get some rewards while I'm there. So I think, yeah, you're right. It needs to be more casual friendly, so that I mean, maybe it just needs more investment. You can make it more
Yeah.
hardcore, fine, but you also have to have the more casual. Because if you just go the more hardcore route, it's not gonna it, it's gonna make it harder.
Okay. Well, and before I go insane about PvP, I have not lost hope. I still have to believe they're going to come out with some sort of post or statement about the direction of where PvP is going to go, right? It it would just be insane for them not to even address it. So I think before the end of the year they are going to say how PvP fits into this new model. I mean, maybe the player base is so small that it's not a big deal at this point, but I am that player base. I play Guild Wars 2 because of PvP only. If there was no PvP in the game, I wouldn't play, right? And so I want the PvP to be good. I just want it to be fun. You know what I mean? I just want it to be fun, to be casual, group up, go play, have some cool rewards, and I would be super happy. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And so
Yep.
I hope they make it as friendly as possible. It's already maybe the most friendly version of PvP to jump into at a low level, with all the builds and stuff. You don't need gear. I mean, I even wish they would make World v World like that. You go into World v World and you choose your build. I mean, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know even know why you have to grind for gear for World v World. Maybe more player expression with the things you can do and the builds you can make, but still, I don't know. All right, so let's get off of that.
So
That's enough.
here's
Oh, you have one
here's
more?
here's
Go for it.
here's a some hope for you. I was just thinking about this when you
Okay.
said that they'd have to say something by the end of this year. It just occurred to me that with this quicker expansion um, schedule, yeah, I think very it would be very ArenaNet of trying to do something different. If one of their expansions, I probably wouldn't do this first expansion, it set a weird tone. But
Mm-hmm.
if one of the expansions was like, hey, this is going to be our PvP focused expansion, like I know you want it
Yeah.
to be the first one, but like, hey, if
Yeah.
it's we're going to the Battle Isles and there's a little bit of story stuff to get you there. Hey, PvE get you there, and then you go there and there's this brand new PvP mode.
Right. Right.
Cool, it's all sequenced in there together.
I don't know. I don't think that would work. I think it has to be a smaller part. Like, here's the thing: PvPers don't actually need much to be happy, right? We'll go into the same map and bang our heads against the wall, playing people over and over and over. Like,
Yep.
we don't need much. So, I think even in like a total themed PvP expansion, I think would probably do more harm because there is more
Interesting.
PvE players. You know what I mean? So I think it still needs to be for the PvEers an expansion. I just want a new battleground system, maybe one map a year, like one fractal a year. Like maybe you make it the summer or fall quarter. You get the map or whatever. You know what I mean? And for PvPers, it's enough if they elite specs are good for PvPers too, or just adding weapons to classes, like
Yep.
just a new way to play. Is great. So I don't need much. I don't need, but I need something. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
so I think it needs to be a part of the expansion. Like there has to be at least one small PvP
Nugget.
feature.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would be totally happy. I don't need more than that. And so because right now I'm getting PvP from Destiny, from Star Wars Old Republic, from WoW, and it's all so super casual. I jump into a battleground. It's tons of fun. I can group up with my friends. We can play. And then when I come back to Guild Wars, oh, you're in this hardcore mode, a part of this casual MMO. It's just a disconnect. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And
Yep.
so I don't know. So let's get off it. Like I said, I rant over. People aren't even gonna watch this video, so what does it matter? So I just want to bring it back to full circle. I like what's going to happen through the end of the year. I think End of Dragons was exceptional. I absolutely loved it. I love
Same
Cantha.
thing.
I love the style, the art style, the characters we encountered. I mean, Anka,
The
of course,
production quality was great.
Anka, Big Hat, like everything was awesome. And that gives me hope. Anka, she wasn't actually in that much of the story, but it gives me hope that they can have a really interesting villain that just spans 1 year of a story, right?
Yeah.
And so End of Dragons, amazing. Want to see more story, new map, new legendaries, all of it. Super happy with all of that. Expansions, I am cautiously optimistic about this new model, right? Living Worlds never got me back necessarily because story isn't my number one thing on the list. But if you have a yearly expansion that has some cool expansion features, maybe hopefully new PvP stuff, World v World, kind of a little sampling of everything throughout the year, and I know I'm getting it every year, I am excited about that. Is that I know that's where you're landing, I think. Is that, overall big picture, are you happy?
Cautiously optimistic is what I was going to describe myself as. You said it first, and that's where I am at. I want to be a little bit more encouraged with the things that I really want, like the elite specs. Like, please tell me those aren't going away. But otherwise, and if they do go away, like all that's gonna do, it's gonna take away a little bit of my enjoyment in the game for future years. But hey, PvEer primarily, and I'm gonna enjoy the story. I'm gonna pick up a different class with an old spec and have fun that way if I need to. But I like the quickened development pace that they are kind of announcing that, hey, we want to shift to this model. I think that's going to be better.
And I know I'm way in the minority on this, but I really want Guild Wars 3. And I know most people are against this, right? But if they have this yearly model and they're bringing out big expansion features, like we talked about, there's only so many more big features you can do, I feel like, after you get through housing and do a couple races and how many elite specs are you going to do? You got to hit the reset button, I feel like, somehow. And Guild Wars 3, I think, would be absolutely massive. And so, I don't know. You can comment or not on that if you're. Are you so invested in Guild Wars 2 now and collected so many things that you're like, I don't want to go to a new game, which is what I hear a lot, and that's a fair point,
Yeah, I think that I would play it if they came out with a Guild Wars 3 in the next several years. I would play it. I would probably feel like I'm missing something, but I feel like it would also have to, like, that'd be a very bold move for them to basically say, hey, we are wiping this slate clean, we're starting over, and look at all this great stuff we can build to. Look where we've come in 10 years with Guild Wars 2, and we can take you on this journey again. I think that they could do that, but it'd be a very risky thing, and there'd be a lot of doubt going in. But I think that maybe with their announcement of their revamped expansion pacing, I think that is an announcement that can be pushed out a little bit more. We've talked about this before, and I was more in like, that probably needs to happen with the end of the Dragon cycle, next 2-3 years. I think now I'm thinking 5 years, and I might be ready for Guild Wars 3.
Well, WoW is like at 20 years, right? So it's not like Guild Wars couldn't go on and be great. I think seeing how these expansions, after we're at 2 years into this, I think we'll know, hey, these expansions are working or they're not working. You know what I mean?
That might be the moment that they have to shift gears to future product.
Right. So Oh, so much stuff. Good stuff. Thank you, ArenaNet, for at least putting this out. We're looking forward to more. Brock, thanks for joining me, man.
I have 2 weeks to get up to date.
You better hurry. You better hurry. I need to jump in on my Ranger, but I have so many other games. There's so many good games. But guys, thank you for joining us today. Man, we're super pumped about the Guild Wars changes. Let us know in the comments if you're more excited or if you're kind of worried. Is this the end of the world for you? I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments. And we're going to be bringing you some more Guild Wars 2 content. So if you like this content, give us a like and a subscribe and let us know that you like this kind of stuff. And yeah, man, thanks everyone. We'll see you next time.